After months of megaphone diplomacy from U.S. President Donald Trump's administration, our first citizen is finally set to come face-to-face with him. Will President Cyril Ramaphosa be subjected to the same political theater that Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky endured? Maybe a screaming match with Trump's drum majorette J.D. Vance in the background? Well, I'll unpack what some experts are saying about how Ramaphosa, the man, should prepare for this momentous occasion. From tone, language and posture, are we ready for what's coming, or will we be on the edge of our seats the minute the cameras go live? Some are suggesting that Ramaphosa shouldn't waste his breath explaining things Trump already knows but chooses to misconstrue. Meanwhile, 49 white Afrikaners landed at the Dulles airport in Washington on Monday evening, but it appears not all Americans are happy with their arrival. At the same time, the Washington Post reports its sources are telling them that Trump's administration intends to boycott our G20 Leaders Summit in November. I'm Ziyanda Ngcobo, and this is Your Week in Politics.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
U.S. President Donald Trump caught many off guard on Monday when he confirmed that a South African delegation is scheduled to meet with him next week. Trump was responding to pointed questions about why his administration has granted refugee status to 49 white Afrikaners while simultaneously shutting America's doors to refugees from other parts of the world, notably African nations facing war and famine.
Dozens of Afrikaners who claim discrimination in their home country are heading to the United States,
right,
where your administration is going to welcome them as refugees. Now, this comes as you've halted virtually all refugee admissions for people fleeing famine and war from countries like Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Why are you creating an expedited path into the country for Afrikaners but not others?
Because they're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. Now, South Africa leadership is coming to see me, I understand, sometime next week. And, you know, we're supposed to have I guess a G20 meeting there or something. But we're having a G20 meeting. I don't know how we can go unless that situation's taken care of. But it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about. But it's a terrible thing that's taking place. And farmers are being killed. They happen to be white. But whether they're white or black makes no difference to me. But white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media, television media, doesn't even talk about it. If it were the other way around, they'd talk about it. That would be the only story they'd talk about. And I don't care who they are. I don't care about their race, their color. I don't care about their height, their weight. I don't care about anything. I just know that what's happening is terrible. I have people that live in South Africa. They say it's a terrible situation taking place. So we've essentially extended citizenship to those people to escape from that violence.
Despite Trump insisting that race plays no role in the U.S. refugee process, the U.S. mission in South Africa issued a statement outlining specific criteria for eligibility. To qualify for resettlement, applicants must be of Afrikaner ethnicity or belong to a racial minority in South Africa.
My wife came from Iran, same thing, persecution from Christianity. And
Trump's remarks came after President Ramaphosa confirmed that he spoke with his U.S. counterparts in the early hours of Monday morning, discussing both their upcoming meeting and the claims that white Afrikaners are fleeing a genocide. Ramaphosa was responding to a question during the 12th edition of the Africa CEO Forum, held the same day in Côte d'Ivoire, where he was on a working visit. The theme of the gathering was, can a new deal between state and private sector deliver the continent a winning hand?
He asked, he said, what's happening down there? And I said, President, what you've been told by those people who are opposed to transformation back home in South Africa is not true. And I added to him, I said, we were well taught by Nelson Mandela and other iconic leaders like Oliver Tambo on how to continue to build a united nation out of the diverse groupings that we have in South Africa. We're the only country on the continent where the colonizers came to stay, and we have never driven them out of our country. So they are staying, and they're making great progress. It's a fringe grouping that does not have a lot of support, that is anti-transformation and anti-change, that would actually prefer to see South Africa going back to apartheid type of policies. And I said to him, I would never do that. I learned at the feet of Nelson Mandela, and we intend to proceed with the implementation of our constitutional architecture. And I thought in my conversation with him early in the morning at 4 o'clock South African time, he understood that. And I said, I'd like to come and meet him so that we can discuss this matter further.
Newzroom Africa's US correspondent Simon Marx says that even though the two presidents discussed the so-called genocide in South Africa, Trump's continued repetition of this falsehood shows that voices like Elon Musk's carry more weight than the South African government's.
And when the president said there that they happen to be white, he's not letting them in because of their race, race doesn't come into it. Well, race for him clearly comes into it, because as he's throwing America's doors open to these 49 Afrikaners, the doors of the same United States are absolutely closed to refugees from conflict zones, including the DRC, Sudan, and many other parts of the world where non-white people are suffering at the hands of oppressors. And President Trump is choosing to argue that what is taking place in South Africa is a genocide. It's an astonishing position to come to, and it's going to be unbelievably challenging for President Ramaphosa and top South African officials when they meet President Trump, apparently next week. It's going to be extraordinarily difficult for them to overcome what is now, in his mind, a fixed viewpoint. Genocide is happening in South Africa.
Welcome. Welcome to the United States of America.
Meanwhile, Americans have had mixed reactions to the arrival of the so-called refugees to their country. One civil rights activist believes that Trump's invitation to white Afrikaners is simply an extension of his Make America Great Again campaign, which is rooted in racism and white supremacist ideology.
It's probably one of the most ridiculous foreign policy decisions that this administration has made. At the least, it's laughable. At the worst, it's offensive. And the reason being is because we know that there is no genocide of white South African folks taking place in South Africa. And it's actually quite dangerous because definitions mean things. And so when we are trivializing the definition of what it means to be a refugee, those who are actually in situations that deserve a refugee status are then, distracted and no longer seen as important or credible because we played fast and loose with the definition of what is considered someone in a need of refugee status.
Here's how some Americans have reacted online to the arrival of the so-called refugees.
So in the midst of this very hardcore immigration policy, something interesting happened today. 59 white South Africans were granted refugee status, and they landed today in Washington, D.C. According to the administration, they were being persecuted in South Africa, and they had to flee. And so in the midst of this very hardcore immigration push, they were welcomed with open arms. Now, why, oh why, would that be? And what were the South Africans fleeing from? What could it be? So they are undoing years and years and decades of racist policies in South Africa, apartheid. And the white South Africans who came over here had to flee because they didn't like the new anti-racist laws in South Africa. That's not fleeing the country because you are in physical danger, that's called, I like the old racist policies.
It is blatantly obvious the way that we treat white South Africans, who are, by the way, for the most part, and I am generalizing here, some of the wealthiest people are well-to-do people in the country. They speak their language. They own most of the land and the property. And somehow they're being granted a fast track to become Americans while they're trying to cut down on immigration from other countries. You know, you get that from where? From the brown people.
Here at home, it seems like not all white Afrikaners are eager to resettle in the United States. Take a look at this moment between my colleague Ziyanda Ngcobo and a guest at the Nampo Agriculture Festival.
From the spirit that we saw when we were still allowed inside, they were all jovial. You know, you could not tell any. Thank you very much, my brother. How are you? Come here. How do you feel about being here?
How do I feel about being here?
Yes.
Yes, Chom, I drove very far to be here. I love being here, Chom.
I mean, people are talking about moving to the US. What's your thinking about that?
Moving what?
To the USA. People are saying that, well, there's genocide in South Africa. How do you feel about that? You look very happy here.
Yeah, I'm very happy here. What do you mean? There's genocide. Zeker op 'n klein skaal, bro, maar ja.
Have a good day, my
brother. Chom. Maar ja, have a good day. Have a good day.
Judging by the mood there, it doesn't seem like everyone got the white genocide memo. Meanwhile, Health Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi briefed the media on Thursday about how his ministry plans to cover the more than 7 billion rand shortfall left by the withdrawal of PEPFAR funding. He insists the impact will be minimal.
When we started this program, we needed 5.3 billion rand. Today, we are spending a whopping 46.8 billion rand, of which 7.9 billion is from PEPFAR. The money that President Donald Trump has announced that is withdrawing. Now, it is inconceivable that out of 46.8 billion rand spent by the country on HIV/AIDS program, the withdrawal of 7.9 billion by President Trump will immediately lead to a collapse of the entire program. We believe it's inconceivable.
President Ramaphosa's visit to the U.S. comes just days after a Washington Post report quoting White House sources who claimed that Trump and his administration plan to boycott the upcoming G20 Leaders Summit. According to the publication, the White House National Security Council has instructed U.S. agencies and departments to halt all preparations, citing South Africa's land confiscation laws as the reason. The report adds that Trump won't attend unless the situation is taken care of.
The White House certainly isn't disavowing that report by the Washington Post and pointed reporters yesterday to President Trump's earlier comments on he's not sure he can attend the G20 Leaders Summit unless steps are taken to combat what he called genocide in South Africa. So that in and of itself is extraordinary. How you engage with this president and find a way of persuading him that diplomatic ties essentially now need to be warmed, they need to be burnished, they need to be developed because, of course, he's got to come to G20 in November at a time when the administration is showing every indication of sort of preparing for a withdrawal from G20.
The presidency says it has not received any formal communication about such a ban through official channels.
We've got sous shepherds and shepherds that information would have come through. We have not received any communication from the U.S. administration about such a ban. We are reading it from the media like everybody else. There's not been any official communication to ourselves. We have not seen any official communication from the U.S. administration. In terms of the newspaper articles that you are quoting, they've also said from inside sources, and you know the problem with sources. Thank you very much.
Bringing it back home now, the South African National Defence Force briefed Parliament on the return of our soldiers from their peacekeeping mission in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. It also seems like there was a thawing of ice between President Cyril Ramaphosa and Rwanda's Paul Kagame. The two leaders shared some light-hearted moments during the Africa CEO Forum, with Kagame even referring to Ramaphosa as "my brother." Now, was this presidential pleasantries or signs of real reconciliation?
Mr. President, how are you? You'll be fine. You'll survive.
People may think that President Kagame and I are in conflict, and some of you may have thought that there's going to be fireworks as we're sitting close to each other.
It is wonderful to see you agreeing and not contradicting each other. You're all thinking it.
So all these efforts have been building a very strong and firm foundation.
President Ramaphosa used to address family meetings during COVID, where he'd have tough conversations with South Africans. And I think, was there a family meeting between you and President Kagame where you had this tough conversation?
Well, we have family meetings unbeknown to many people who see certain things happening just 2 seconds, 3 seconds. We have family meetings between the two of us, ongoing discussions, and on a speed dial with each other to discuss all manner of things. So forget the psychedelic things that happen in the air. Focus on what we do together to build the peace process.
President Ramaphosa, these people are sold. You're preaching to the choir in some ways. We all believe in the dream of the FCFTA. But the borders are closed. The flights are expensive. We can't get visas to South Africa.
Now, don't be too personal.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause.
After the break, we shift focus to President Ramaphosa's upcoming working visit to the US. How should the union buildings be preparing for that high-stakes meeting with Trump? Everything from language and tone to posture and scenario planning is likely top of mind in Pretoria right now. I'll bring you expert insights right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thanks for staying tuned to Newzroom Afrika here on channel 405. Now, a historic moment is on the horizon for South Africa as President Cyril Ramaphosa prepares to jet off to the United States to meet his counterpart, President Donald Trump. The gathering comes at a time when relations between the two countries are at an all-time low. The US just this week welcomed 49 white Afrikaners who were granted refugee status, with Trump insisting that they're victims of persecution and even genocide. And complicating matters further is South Africa's ongoing legal challenge against Israel at the International Court of Justice, tensions around AGOA, and long-standing concerns about our transformation laws. And this is despite repeated efforts by the South African government to provide clarity about our equity-related legislation. Will Ramaphosa have any cards to play, or should we hold our breath and hope that our first citizen won't be subjected to this?
Of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
So, just how should President Ramaphosa prepare for this all-important moment?
So clearly, this is a tricky assignment for anybody. And we've seen the perils and the trapdoors that you can fall through, from the Zelensky Oval Office moment to various other encounters in the Oval Office in the last couple of months. So this is a very difficult assignment, and to state the obvious, the president has to, on the one hand, be firm and principled and hold the line and not be bullied. On the other, he has to be diplomatic. He has to somehow craft a constructive relationship with the American president. This will test Cyril Ramaphosa's long career in political life. And in many ways, I don't wish to belittle any of his previous accomplishments, but this in many ways is a moment he's been building up to. And all of his statecraft, all of his experience, all of his dealings with tough characters over many, many years, including in the 1980s, will come into to being at this point. To answer your question about preparation, I think that he and his team will want to run certain scenarios across their bows. They'll want to be prepared for almost any eventuality. And of course, we know that President Trump is deliberately erratic. He likes to create disorder. I think he likes to put his foes or his adversaries or the protagonists that he's dealing with on the back foot.
The unflappable character that you speak of when you talk about President Cyril Ramaphosa will be key. In addition to that, his tone, his messaging and language will be very critical, given the fact that there are already political parties who believe that he should not renege on our country's sovereignty in any shape, way or form, whether it's through trade deals, whether it's through concessions of any kind, circumventing our laws. And what should it be in dealing with someone, as you've said, like Donald Trump, who is deliberately erratic?
So assuming they have time and capacity, and they have an extremely busy agenda, of course, what President Ramaphosa and his team will be wanting to do, ideally, is test various scenarios, prepare accordingly, even role play. We know that presidents will often get their team to play different actors in a kind of real life scenario in preparation for a meeting such as this. And I think that will include trying to determine where are the negotiating red lines. Because whilst we know that President Ramaphosa is someone who is good at brokering a deal and knows the power and the art of compromise, clearly he will not want to concede too much to the American president. And that question of South African sovereignty, of holding on to the principles that are dear to us and important to the government, is going to be a critical factor.
When asked about how the South African government is preparing for the meeting and whether they're concerned about any kind of humiliation at the hands of Trump, this is what the minister in the presidency had to say.
We are not going to the US on our own. We have been invited by President Trump. He is the one who made the public announcement that he is going to meet with us next week. So there is no one who invites a guest to mistreat them. So we are expecting the highest level of decorum and necessary protocols to be accorded. It doesn't mean we'll agree in all matters, we'll differ, but we believe that our relationship with the US is mutually beneficial. We also have that which the US will require, the critical minerals, and we have approved the strategy of critical minerals. So our relationship is very mutually beneficial, and that's the focus of our emphasis.
Newzroom Africa's US correspondent Simon Marx believes that trade deals and bartering will likely be the order of business.
I think it's really got to be focused on concrete deliverables that South Africa can bring to the United States, to its business community, and frankly, to the Trump business organization. I mean, you obviously don't walk into the Oval Office and say, Mr. President, how would you like to build a hotel resort on the top of Table Mountain? But there are ways, of course, of engaging with the Trump organization through different channels that in many ways I think become absolutely pivotal for any foreign leader now visiting the United States. I mean, it is absolutely apparent that this conflation of the national interest with the personal and family interests of America's president is baked in. And you only have to look at the way in which the Saudis and the Qataris and the Emiratis have been handling that over the last few weeks and months to understand that there is a pathway that others have laid out. Now, as a country, you have to decide how far down that path are you willing ethically and morally to go in order to secure a restoration of the relationship.
That's all I have time for in your week in politics, but make sure you stay tuned to Newzroom Africa over the coming days and into the next week, because I'll be heading to Washington, D.C. to do a bit of country duty as President Ramaphosa meets with Donald Trump face to face to try and iron things out. You won't want to miss a moment, and we've got plenty in store for you right here on Channel 405. But for now, it's goodbye Thank you for watching.